Yes. Recording. Okay, we're good. Okay, so some little housekeeping items, some little business we have to discuss. If you'll notice in the last month's newsletter, it talked about every year we have to have nominations for the elected officials, and I'd ask Margaret Ramsey, Debbie Johnson, and Paula Caper, who's with us, to be the nominating committee. And I wanted her to report. So did she have any nominations that were sent to her?
No, we had no nominations sent.
Okay, well, that means that, it's interesting. The bylaws actually say the elected positions are actually for 1 year, but we always serve for 2. I don't, it's just a tradition, right? So that means that Marge Broderick is your treasurer. I'm his president. Glow Hills, she's on here somewhere. There she is our vice president. And Maria Callan, I think she was on here too somewhere, is our secretary for another year. So next year we'll have a new slate of officers. Okay, and the other thing is Candace is on this, and she's going to talk about the different fundraising opportunities through Lost Our Home, our charity fundraiser.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? It's bad computer audio. We have a bunch of special events coming up for Lost Our Home. And if you follow Lost Our Home Pet Rescue on Facebook, that's the quickest way to find things out. Or go to the website lostourhome.org, and you have to search a little on the right-hand drop-down menu, go to special events, and it has all the things coming up. First of all, tomorrow night there's an event at the Crown Plaza San Marcos, which is in Chandler. It's a happy hour from 4 to 6. People are encouraged to bring their dogs to the patio, Linda. And Lost Our Home will be accepting donations. We're kind of low on certain wet foods, canned foods. So that's just a little happy hour thing in Chandler. The big events are, we have our Play for Paws, which is a 50-50 raffle. Tickets are 10 for $10, 50 for $20, 150 for $40, etc. And that's going on through May 5th. And you can buy your tickets online if you go to the website. And you don't have to be present to win. A big deal around the entire state is Arizona Gives Day. And a lot of different organizations participate in that. And that's April 6th. And what Lost Our Home is doing, we've done this in the past, for $25, a $25 donation, you will get a one-of-a-kind exclusive pet portrait of your dog or cat. Now, these are very whimsical. These are not done by professional artists. They're done by volunteers. And if you go to the website, you can see there's the dog and there's the pet portrait. So it's just kind of a value-added thing for a donation on Arizona Gives Day. And then the last thing we're doing is the Cinco de Meow telethon, which of course is going to be on May 5th at 5 p.m. It's 2 hours. Obviously, you don't have to watch the whole thing, but there's going to be videos, fun things, police canine demonstration, best guacamole, how to train a dog, a cat. So there will be more information on that coming soon. But again, it's all on the website. And we appreciate your participation.
Okay, thanks, Candace. Okay,
Thank you.
Perfect segue to that is that we're having our only fundraiser this year is on May 14th at the Foothills Golf Club, free to members, $6.50 for guests, non-members. And basically it's a ice cream social. It's from 5 to 7 in the evening. It's also a bazaar. This is our way we're gonna raise money for our fundraiser. So far we have a lot of donations, but we need more. We're trying to get a variety. We have jewelry, clothing, we have books. Somebody made a basket, somebody made, our people that do crafts are making quilted table runners and placemats. And so we have a lot of variety. It's something for everyone. So I highly, it's open right now to register on the website. So I highly recommend you go ahead and register, and, you know, bring your spouse, your family, your friends, the more the merrier. And anyone on the charity committee can accept a donation, and we're happy to come pick them up if you need us to. So I just also want to mention we have a couple of guests here today, and Carol Damond. She want to wave, Carol? She's from Alberta, and she has actually attended our meetings before. And then we have Joanne Greenswijk. Did I say that right? Yeah, wait, yay!
Yes. Hello.
Yay me! So welcome, and
Thank you.
you know, definitely check us out. I'd sent both of them our website so they can check into our other activities. Okay, anybody have any other items?
I'm here from Alberta.
Carol from Alberta, right?
Yes.
Are you here for the winter?
Yes, my son lives here in Awatuki.
Oh, that's great. We're glad to have. I bet you're glad to be here.
I am very glad to be here.
Okay. Any other business items before I turn it over to Mary for our presentation?
Yes. I just noticed there was a couple of things in the chat.
Oh, yes.
I want to look at that first.
Oh, a rummage sale in May too. What is? You mean we're only doing the bazaars, so basically it's is that what you're talking about at the fundraiser, Elaine? Yeah. Oh no, they're not new. They can be gently used items. I mean, a lot of people have been cleaning out their closets and their drawers over the last year. I have been doing that myself, so I have some things to donate. Yeah, so no, it doesn't have to be new. It can be gently used.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. All right. Well, what I want to do is turn it over to our speaker. I wanted to introduce our speaker, Dr. Mary Logan Rothschild is an emeritus professor of women and gender studies and history at Arizona State University, and she moved to Arizona 45 years ago to become an assistant professor of American history at ASU and founded the Women's Studies program there. After founding the Women's Studies program at the University of Washington as a doctoral candidate. And her areas of specialization are the history of the American feminist movement, oral history methods and practice, and gender equality in schools and universities. And her topic today is the lives of Arizona women, past and present. And I've already set you up, Mary, so that you can share your screen.
Mary, you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I have now. You
Okay.
can hear me? Okay.
There you go.
I want to explain that this project was an oral history project that I did. I got funding from the Arizona Humanities Council. We interviewed 30 women around the state. All of the women had to be over 70 years of age. There was one who was not. She was 68. And they had to have lived the majority of their lives in Arizona, and most were born here. And it was done in the late 80s. So it's now, 30 years old. But we did the presentation around the state a million times and did a reader's theater initially. And we also wrote a book that the University of Arizona Press published. So This was originally a slide tape show, and I am like a negative technology person. So it has been switched to a keynote address, and because that's what Mac has instead of PowerPoint. And there are things that I can't do. But like get rid of the first 20 seconds of static before the tape comes on. And I have to manually put the slides forward. So you'll have to just bear with 20 seconds at the beginning, but it's, I'm happy to take questions afterwards. I hadn't seen this for a long time, and looking at it again, it made me happy. The women were incredibly gracious and generous, and represent the diversity of Arizona from the territorial and early statehood days. So I hope you enjoy it. And now I'm going to see if I can pull this off, which is always a question.
Yes.
I look to you, I look to you for courage in my life, and I promise it's not just foolish idolatry that makes me gaze at you in wonder.
The history of Arizona women's lives includes building communities, making a living, creating the families, and forming the society that's now Arizona. The stories that follow came from oral history interviews conducted with women who lived all their adult lives in Arizona. All are over 70 years of age, and many were born here or came as young children. Previously untold, these stories from ordinary women range from the late 19th century to the present and help us to understand the dynamic role women have played in our past. They reflect the diversity of our heritage and show us models we can build on for our future.
Idolatry that makes me gaze at you in wonder. She's the mother of my youth. She's the daughter of my age. This woman now and always, survival is her name. Healer of my pain, quiet in her flame.
I was born on the Papago Reservation. Over there, right under those old mountains. In Papago, they mean ring around the rock. But I couldn't tell you my age. I don't know. We didn't know the years had numbers. My people never took care of the ages of their children, so none of us really knows how old we are. We just guess at ages, but we really don't know. I must be about 83 or 84. I don't know, but that's the way I feel.
We first moved to Phoenix about 1916. We walked down the street and we saw a store and a man standing in the doorway who looked Jewish. Well, many new arrivals looked for other Jewish people to give them some guidance. The streets were unpaved, and when it rained, people put planks down across the street so you wouldn't sink into the mud. I came to love Phoenix because the size was comfortable, and I loved the desert. You know, the canals were everywhere, and they were lined with cottonwood trees. You know how delicate the leaves of the cottonwoods are, and they seemed almost detached. And against the sunset, they would be like a mass of black lace. Some people were put off by the desert. They felt it was harsh and ugly, but I never felt that way about it.
I was born in Arizona, the territory of Arizona, 1908, August 14th, one of the hottest months we have. My parents bought a farm right close to what is now the main Sears store on Camelback, and they were way out in the country, and it was desert, and it was a lonely place. And the winds and the sand blew, and the snakes were in the chicken's nest, and the coyotes ate the dog's food, and it was a very lonely place.
My mother came to Arizona across Lee's Ferry, which is the most treacherous place in the world for anyone to cross. She never got over the fear of that crossing. She had this tiny baby, just 3 months old, and the boy who drove the team was only 14 or 15. And it took 3 weeks to get from southern Utah to Apache County. And they got there in December of 1880. And my mother said that she had this big sack of rice, and they had rice all the time. But they just had to live through that winter and sleep in their covered wagon.
My father got a 160-acre homestead in Sunny Slope in 1915. During July and August, every night a rolling bank of red dust came over the northeast mountains, a smothering bank of dust. Then I remember poor Mother the next day patiently sweeping out dust and patiently mopping the floors, only to know it would be the same thing the next night. Now, we don't have those dust storms anymore. I have not seen that red bank of dust come over those mountains in 20 years.
We got off the train in 1914, the old Southern Pacific train. My father looked at the people at the station in Tempe and he said, "This is God's country." I've never seen anyone adore a place as much as my father loved Tempe, and we haven't moved since.
In the early part of this century, ordinary living was hard. Growing up without running water, electricity, supermarkets, labor-saving home appliances, and air conditioning was a real challenge.
We lived on the reservation. We had a hard life. We had to find our food out in the desert. We lived on different things that grow in different seasons of the year. When these things are growing, we had to go with my grandmother. She knows where to gather and how to gather these things. We had to gather as much as we could to be dried and stored away in jars. And that was our food for the year, or as long as we had it.
In those days, you had to heat the water outside and do the laundry. Then you had to scrub them. Then you came in with a big old flat iron, and everything had to be ironed. They cooked 2 or 3 meals a day. There weren't any sandwiches. We had hot meals, hot biscuits. Boy, my mama baked. In those days, you didn't go to town just to get a loaf of bread.
For entertainment, I used to attend the country dance. That was all I knew. I hadn't been around any city. People all gathered into one person's home, or maybe the schoolhouse. Got a couple of musicians, and everybody would come and bring the children. It was for the whole family. We'd dance all night. It was about all we had.
We always had picnics, school picnics, church picnics, family picnics. And I remember on hot summer afternoons swimming in the canal.
To keep cool in the summer, we'd move our beds out under the trees at night. We took the babies' beds out in the afternoon in the shade and put wet sheets all around them to cool them down. And people took their little fans to church. Every mortuary furnished little fans, and it was about the only cooling we had. People say to me now, "How did you live?" And I say, "Well, what else were we to do? I mean, we didn't know anything else to do. We just lived."
Women were responsible for the health of their families. All women knew certain home remedies, and some were highly skilled as healers and midwives.
My mother had this woman, Aunt Rhoda S. Merrill, come up to the ranch on horseback and wait on her. She was midwife and doctor, took the place of both, and in fact, she was doctor to all of Mother's children that were born there on the San Pedro. She was a very lovely, stately-looking lady, and she rode horse real well. She carried her suitcase right along with her on the horse.
Well, my sister had diphtheria, and I remember they just treated her with home remedies. They were great on home remedies. Mother liked herbs a great deal, and we used a lot of herbs. She had peppermint and catnip and cinnamon. She had a lot of them planted around our place. Mother always made cinnamon tea for us if we looked like we needed something for a laxative, and that was one of her real good remedies. And of course, peppermint tea. She gave it to us for cramps in our stomach, and every once in a while, Mother would get a little flask of brandy that we'd use for real bad colds, and she said that it would be as good as anything else we could use.
Often home remedies weren't enough. When the flu epidemic of 1918-1919 swept Arizona, thousands died. Babies and children and adults. No one was immune, and everyone was affected, either by the deaths of family members or friends. Still, the belief in home remedies remained.
My Grandma West didn't get the flu, though. She said, I can't get it. I have to take care of my children. And she would feed them a lot of onions every day. She'd make up a big onion stew, or she'd saute those onions or fry them or fix them some way so they'd eat a lot of onions. And they got through the flu. Now, I don't know if there's a connection, but she sure thought there was.
As it is today, schooling was a central part of growing up. Unlike today, however, getting to school and staying in school was often a struggle. Some families moved to other parts of Arizona in order to have schools for their children, and some children had to leave home at an early age to attend school.
About 2 miles or a little more than that is where I went to first grade. The school was made out of adobe and was old and crumbly. We had to quit that school, and so they brought the school children to my father's ranch, and we had school in the honey house for a while until they could get an old schoolhouse built on the north side of the house.
My freshman year at Phoenix Union, I came in from Glendale every morning and went home every evening on the streetcar. It was great because I did my homework and study, an hour coming and an hour going.
When I was 13 years old, we were told by my father that a white man came and told them that they were taking children to a school a ways off the reservation, where they were taking children to go there to speak their language, to learn to write, and to learn to count. He said he couldn't say no. I think they will bring you back to us after when you have learned these things they want to show you. So he said, we'll have to get you ready. There is a day that he is coming to get you. So we, my brother and I, we got ready. We never wore shoes. I went off to school barefoot, and after I got at school, then they gave us shoes to wear. I remember, I think I suffered a while till I got used to wearing shoes. And that day, when we got taken off to school, that was sad. We have never separated from our father and mother. That was the first time. It took me a long time to get used to away from my father and mother or helping my father and mother. As my father didn't speak English or anything, he was afraid he won't find me at school if he goes during school year. So he went there with a man who had a daughter who said, if we go there in the hot weather time, the school is out then and the children are always out. We could go there and look them up and find them. So he came with the man coming to see his daughter, and that was the first time I saw my father in years.
I started out at Madison School, but I had to leave it and go to the black school because they had a state law. They had to provide separate schools. Some districts we went with the whites, but then they said separate schools, and maybe a district would have just one black student. So they just hung up a sheet. Now, if anyone from the State Department walked in, this little person knew to go behind the sheet. Then they were separated. So they provided their separate facility on the other side of the sheet, as long as somebody was checking it. But if no one was checking on them, they just went with the rest.
Almost all the women we interviewed married, and most began families. They had full lives and worked hard as homemakers. In addition, they worked in their communities as volunteers. Women volunteers formed cultural groups and began art guilds, symphonies, theaters, museums, and libraries. They founded the community helping organizations we still depend on, schools, hospitals, and churches.
Because I am a Mojave Indian, I was especially concerned with my people. I joined the hospital auxiliary and helped organize the Indian hospital in Phoenix. I taught classes at the Sunday school and the summer church programs. I raised funds for the church and the needy overseas and student scholarships for the ministry. I've been on the church board a number of times.
The women started this church. It was the only one in the whole settlement around Peoria, and women started it in their own homes.
Also beginning in women's homes, the women's club movement spread throughout the United States. Arizona women joined in educating themselves and volunteering their services to their communities.
I was in the Altruja Club. We always had a project. The county hospital we had was way out in West Phoenix with a lot of sand and dirt and dust around it. We developed the land there so there wouldn't be so much dust. In the ward, there were no curtains or partitions between the beds, so we had curtains put up.
The Glendale Women's Club was founded in 1901. Then in 1902, it was federated with the General Federation of Women's Clubs. Now, because of our interest in culture and education, one of the first projects we sponsored was to build the first library in Glendale. We had an old building donated, and then we held dances and card parties to raise money for books for the library. For several years, our main objective was the library. And later, besides culture and education, we added several other departments in the Women's Club, like welfare and United Fund. I've had the joy of seeing the progress year to year in the Women's Club, and the old and the young women working together. There's no generation gap there.
During the Second World War, we did Red Cross work. The main thing we did was to set up the canteen down at the railroad depot. People donated a lot of grapefruit, so we had grapefruit juice and we made sandwiches and coffee, and also we made donuts. All of a sudden, a troop train would come in with 200 boys. We were never allowed to know in advance how many boys would be on a particular train, but we had to have everything ready for them. On many trains that were not allowed to stop, we would have cold juice ready and pass it to them through the windows when the train slowed down. And the boys used to throw letters out of the windows, and we would mail them for them. Many of the trains were on their way to California, where the boys would prepare to go overseas. I don't think the boys really needed the food or anything. It was more of a morale builder.
I was very active in the YWCA. You know, the Y provided shelter for a lot of young women during the Depression and the war and helped to get them settled somewhere. And the Y also held a lot of education classes, particularly gym classes and health classes for girls and young women. And the YWCA was early in recognizing problems related to Black people. At that time, there weren't many places in the community where Blacks could go for social gatherings, but the Y was quite a cross-section. That was the first organization I recall that became oriented to minority groups.
In addition to club work, women in Arizona have always been involved in politics, both as volunteer workers and as politicians.
In 1952, I became a deputy registrar as well as a precinct committeeman. In July and August, tremendously hot months, a number of us volunteers spent time in a little donated trailer. We sat in there with petitions for different Republican candidates and asked all comers to sign.
As part of their politics, women worked for social change as well.
Over the years, I've had occasion to write to my congressman to ask a voting favor. I wrote one of them when ERA was attempting to have an extension of time. He wrote me back an abominable letter. He said, "In no way is this constitutional. I will in no way vote for this. It's a preposterous request, and you can depend on the fact that I will do everything I can to vote against it." Well, I thought, I'm ashamed of the day I ever tried to send you to Congress.
I worked in the NAACP. We picketed Woolworths and the Rialto Theater and all the 10-cent stores because they had segregation there. We were working for jobs and would go to the businessmen and ask them to hire Blacks. Of course, some couldn't hire because the girls had never had training in typing. They were not allowed to go to the business schools, and what typing they could do, they learned in high schools. We also worked on ending segregation in the restaurants. One of the Negro ladies told the head down at Woolworths, "We just bought some merchandise over here on this side. Why can't we buy food?" Well, he couldn't deny it because after all, they were serving customers all over the store. So that was broken down. Then there was trouble out to the airport. They would not serve Negroes, and yet it was run by the city. So several of us went to the mayor's office. We said, "The airport is run by the city, and we would like to have it open so that all races can go, because all races are supporting the airport." He said, "I'll let you know my decision today." We laughed, and he called and said he had made the change and it would be open to all. I said to my friend, "Let's not hurry," I said. "They may put something in the food. Let's wait a little while. They may be so mad they want to make us sick." I remember we had a lot of fun with that.
Reflecting the experience of women around the country, Arizona women worked for pay throughout their lives. While few of the women we interviewed worked continuously, all of them did paid work at various times, and many worked for pay in their homes or out for most of their lives. Contrary to the myth that women work only for pin money, the women we interviewed worked because they and their families needed the income they brought home. While most of them also liked their work, they did it because they needed the money to survive. Often, the paid work they did was related to their traditional work in the home. Many women took in washing and ironing. We asked a woman from Miami, Arizona, to talk about her paid work. What work did you do? ¿Qué clase de trabajo hacía?
Lavaba, planchaba. Yo lavé y planché aquí, criatura. Así fue mi vida, lavar y planchar.
Ah, you spent your life washing and ironing. And in those days, there were no steam irons. En esos tiempos no tenía steam irons. ¿Qué hacían? What did they do?
Pues, con la leña, allá con leña y calentando la plancha en la estufa. Ya todas esas facilidades yo las he agarrado después, porque yo no tenía facilidades antes.
You didn't have the modern conveniences we have today, and you had to burn firewood and heat the iron on the wood stove.
Yo todo lo más duro, lavadero y tina. En las noches lavaba para alcanzar el día. A las 12 de la noche andaba yo colgando ropa. Había días que no dormíamos. Trabajé muy duro.
You washed clothes by hand in a tub, and then ironed and folded clothes nearly all night. Many days you had no more than a few hours sleep. You did work hard. Beside washing and ironing, women did other traditional women's work for pay.
In my father's shop, we had women who worked in the sewing rooms. They made draperies and they also made slipcovers. It was all seamstress work and they were all widows. And it was very cheaply paid labor.
Some women occasionally took in boarders, and one woman we interviewed ran a guest house. Others did women's most traditional job, house cleaning. As one woman told us,
well, for Black women, there was always housework. You got $1 a day and bus fare.
Women also had jobs that required more formal training and had specialized skills. Even so, they were still generally seen as women's jobs. Some of the women were beauticians, secretaries, social workers, and nurses. But the most common of this type of work was school teaching.
My first teaching job was in Pine, Arizona, a little Mormon town. My salary was $160 a month for 9 months, and I paid $40 a month for room and board. I had a little room on the corner of this boarded house. It wasn't made of brick, just up and down boards. Through the cracks, I could see the snow in the winter. I started teaching in 1936, right in the middle of the Depression. I graduated from Arizona State Teachers College in May, but there were no vacancies. And then a week before school started, a friend of mine married, and they didn't hire married women teachers in those days. And if you were married, well, you were automatically fired. So I got the job that she had. I began teaching with 52 children in one class. In those days, you had large classes, and it wasn't anything to have 45 or 50 children. My principals always asked me, how do you do it? They just sit and laugh and talk together. I said, yes, it takes 6 months to get everybody laughing and talking with one another, and then you spend the next 3 months telling them to shut up.
In addition to these more common work experiences, many women worked at family businesses with their husbands. Some, who were widowed early, took over those businesses. One woman ran a large ranch, and a Mexican-American woman took over her family's hardware store. But for most, job patterns remained traditional until World War II opened new work opportunities for women.
I was a saw operator during the war, making parts for planes. The men and the women at the aircraft plant were doing the same kind of work, but the men were paid more than the women. They'd bring in jobs, and each of us would have a job to do. The man next to me would take 2 days, and I'd get mine done in 8 hours. But he got more money than I did per hour. And I said to the boss, I said, how come George gets to take 2 days to do this job? And I get it done in one. And then sometimes you bring me his job. Why do you bring it to me? The boss said, I know you'll get it done.
World War II really brought about a great release for a lot of women because they took the places of the men in the mines here in Globe and Miami who went to war. And they didn't give up the jobs when the men came back.
When World War II came, I had a lot of difficulty finding women to work cleaning rooms for the guest ranch. They were all going into the factories to work, and I couldn't pay what the factories were paying.
The war had a special effect on Japanese American women in Arizona. Executive Order 9066 evacuated all persons of Japanese ancestry from the western half of the 3 Pacific Coast states and the southern third of Arizona. The boundary designating the restricted zone in Arizona ran along Highway 95 from Ehrenberg on the Arizona-California border to Quartzsite and east along Highway 60 and ran through Phoenix along Grand Avenue and Van Buren. It stretched through Tempe along Mill Avenue and Apache Boulevard, running through the center of Mesa and continued to Globe where it extended along Highway 70 to the Arizona-New Mexico border. 2 women explained what happened to them and their families as a result of internment.
At that time, I was married, and my husband and I were farming quite extensively. But it was all on the south side of the highway, so we had to just practically give everything away and move over. Many of the families took a great loss.
We could have easily moved across the highway. Van Buren and Grand Avenue, that was the dividing line. We could have moved north of there and been in what they called the free zone. But we just chose to go to camp. I guess because we couldn't be on the run forever, and we just didn't know what would happen.
At the camps, everyone, men and women, had to work. The pay was either $16 or $19 a month, depending on the skill the job required.
I worked in the accounting department, timekeeping, and we made out the payroll for Camp 1, 2, and 3, and then we'd send it out. I got $19 a month. And my sister was a secretary for the block manager. Then she went to the optometry department. She was assistant optometrist. She fixed all the glasses and fitted them. And that was for $16 a month.
A lot of women in the camps took advantage of the time they had never had before to learn new trades. I remember a woman at Topaz Camp who had wanted to paint since she was 6 years old. She took advantage of this, her first opportunity. When I paint, she said, all the dust goes away out of my life.
The women we interviewed were ordinary women. They were also builders and survivors. Strong and courageous, they faced the world with humor, kept their families together, worked hard, helped each other, and were integral to building the community we know as Arizona today. Above all, they were survivors. Although her story is her own, one woman spoke for the spirit of all the women when she recounted her experience.
When my husband died in 1929, I had no family here, no relations to help at all, and I was left heavily in debt. I didn't have a dime. I didn't have anything but just the determination to work and to take care of my children and educate them. All I wanted was life, health, and strength. I felt I would come out of it, but I had 50 cents cash on the night my husband died. I had nothing to do but work and manage. If you don't manage, then you won't make it. So with the few dimes I had, I did just that. I'd give the children 10 cents apiece for their lunch, and sometimes that would be all I had. But I got my money every day from the customers, and eventually I worked my beauty business up to 6 operators and myself.
This account of strength, hard work, building, and surviving is the story of Arizona women. They contributed their intelligence and their labor, both paid and unpaid. And what they told us helps us understand the significant part women played in the history of Arizona. The women who gave us this history were all over 70 years of age. They grew up in Arizona. They had families here. These were their words, their stories, their histories, their recollections. They are important to us and to all the people of Arizona.
Something about the women in my life. Oh, there's something about the women. There's something about the women. Something about the women in my life. Oh, there's something about the women. There's something about the women. Something about the women in my life. In my life, there are women. In my life, there are women. In my life, there are women. In my life. Oh, there's something about the women. Something about the women.
Can't.
Something about.
Okay. Well, that was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was fun for me to see it again. I haven't seen it in a long time.
Well, let's open it up to, well, before we do that, Mary, do you have any comments that you would like to make in addition to what we saw?
Sure. I was very concerned in the beginning about representing the diversity in Arizona because, and choosing the people we were to interview, because we knew we could only interview 30 people, which, by the way, interviewing 30 people is a big deal. Most oral history projects aren't that large. And all these interviews were done multiple times. So they were done at least twice, and most of them were done 3 or 4 times. So, we had more than 5,000 pages of stories, of interviews. So this is like the ice cube of the tip of the iceberg, right? And then we read them all a million times and decided about themes. But how to choose the people was really an issue. And we had people sort of volunteer themselves or volunteer friends or mothers or relations. And so some of them were just really obvious, like Cecilia Sneezy, the Mojave Indian. She was White Mountain Apache. And others we could have, for instance, had 30 interviews of Mormon women from old Mormon families, but we wanted to represent the variety of people in Arizona. So we did that. We looked at the data for the census during the period we were looking at, and we tried to make sure that we got Native women and African-American women and Hispanic women. We're probably a little overrepresented for Black women because we had 2, maybe a tiny bit underrepresented for Hispanic women. And then I was very concerned that we get the different economies in Arizona during territorial and early statehood. So we wanted to interview people from the mining communities of Globe, Miami, and farms. And we decided to stick with farmer ranchers in Maricopa County because it was being run out of ASU and we had travel time involved. And then we wanted town economies. So we got people from Phoenix and Tempe. It turned out that concern was totally unwarranted. It was a decent concern, but the truth is there was a tremendous amount of mobility in the state and territory. So that even though somebody might have been a miner for a while, then they might have come to Phoenix or Tempe, or they were ranchers and then they moved back. And so the different economies, though they were profoundly different and very important to the origins of the state, there was so much mobility, it didn't really matter that we made sure we had X number of people from a mining town and X number of people from farming, ranching, et cetera. So I guess that's all I want to say. And it was a great project, and I'm glad we did it, and other people have used it for other books. And and all of the women are now dead. So it's a real document for them. And I guess the last thing I'll say is that every single one of them at one point or another, saw our Readers Theater, which we did. That was part of the grant. And all of them thought they had been well represented and were happy with what we did. And that made me very happy.
I have a question. Are there any books? Did any of them write a book, or is there a book about this at all?
Yeah, I wrote a book. I can show it to you if you want, but it's called Doing What the Day Brought, an Oral History of Arizona Women, and it's University of Arizona Press.
And you know what, I might have missed it, but what year was the video put together?
I don't know.
The copyright was 1978. On the song.
On the song, yeah, but not the video. We did the oral history. I don't actually remember. We did I remember that our book came out in 1991, in the fall of 1991 with University of Arizona Press. And the grant was like 86, 87. And we did the video as part of the grant. So 86, somewhere between 86 and 88, I guess.
Okay. And you mentioned that there was still, like, we're seeing like the tip of the iceberg in terms of all the material. Is anyone going to do anything with the rest of that material at any point?
No, I don't. I mean, various people are using, every family got their woman. I mean, we gave the interviews back to every person who took part in it. The interviews as a whole are in the archives at Arizona State University, and they're open to the public now. Our book used a lot of material. Again, we read it over and over and over, and then got themes. This is too technical, but we were doing a new idea of how to present oral history. Normally, oral histories are presented like there'll be 5 pages on one person and 5 pages on another person and 5 pages on another person. And what we were trying to do was to get at general themes that all the women, or many of the women, had, and then extract stories that illustrated those themes. So it wasn't person by person, rather it was issue by issue. And that was an innovation in the field of oral history at the time, of academic oral history at the time. But the material is open, and I mean, I could run to my bookshelf and show you the book.
Yeah, that'd be good.
I don't know if you can see it, but it's,
yes.
And it went into 2 editions. I don't know that it's in print right now, but it was available at local bookstores for a long time, and academic books don't usually go into 2 editions, 2 printings, so we were happy.
I see it on Amazon. I just looked it up. You can buy it on Amazon, guys. Yeah, it looks really good.
Thank you. It's been fun. I haven't, for a while, I was on for over 20 years, almost 30 years, I was on the Arizona Humanities Council Speakers Bureau, and I literally took the slide tape show around to so many women's clubs and men's clubs and libraries in Arizona. I must have done it at least probably 150 times, but I haven't looked at it in 7 or 8 years, and it was fun for me to see it again, buried as it was on my computer.
I think we all have an appreciation
The internet.
of where we are now compared
Right.
to where we were. And I mean, you could see in a lot of those pictures, which were amazing pictures of, people hoeing, in the field, hoeing weeds or whatever, and whatever they were doing. I mean, it would look really hard. The miner, the woman, there was a miner. I mean, my goodness, just think where we have come from.
Yeah. And that was part of what I really wanted to get at. It was interesting. There were certain things. Every single woman talked about washing clothes outside in a tub by hand. Every single woman talked about ironing, because the fabrics were much harsher than they are now. And you had to iron so that they could be soft enough you could wear them without getting a rash.
Oh.
And every single woman talked about wrapping the babies in wet sheets and putting them out under the trees. And we could not find a picture. Not one photograph could we find of that. And yet it was something that every single woman talked about. So when we had that part, we have the couple lying on the ground under a tree. But and I said that sometime, I don't remember, once when I was doing that, and a woman in the audience said, "I have pictures of that in my scrapbook." And I said, "Yeah, but I don't have them." There were several pictures. Most of the pictures were from of the women themselves or from their own collections, but not all of them. Some of them are historic pictures that we had to find from a million different sources, and that wasn't easy either. The woman with the hoe, who you seem to have, you was in your, that's a Dorothy, the great, it's a WPA Depression picture. The great woman photographer's name is just escaping me. Anyway, and the picture of of Aunt Rhoda S. Merrill, who was the midwife. She rode horse real well. That's actually a Brooklyn, New York nurse who was climbing up onto a roof. And we made her climbing off of her horse. I mean, we didn't doctor the pictures, but we cropped them judiciously. So pulling together the 140 photographs was its own challenge. Although, as I said, the majority of the photographs were from the women themselves or of the women themselves. The very last, that twinkly little woman at the end, Clara Kimball, was the oldest person in the group, and she was 95 when we interviewed her.
Were there any, it seemed that I recognized some of these women. Were any of them like the women that we would know now? I mean, were they like in politics or?
No. That's a good question. I was interested in, quote, ordinary women. Women did not almost only one of the women said, "Oh, sure. Yeah, I can see why you'd want to interview me." Every single other woman said, "Well, I didn't do anything special, but you might want to interview my neighbor or my aunt or my sister-in-law. They did blah, blah, blah." I wasn't interested in people who, I wanted to reflect what life was like for ordinary women in this time period in Arizona. So although there were great women politicians, Arizona was a leading state in integrating women into politics. Those women get oral histories. Those women get noticed. What I was interested in was ordinary women. And it was interesting how they, to a person, said, they really were surprised that we would be interested in talking to them, because they really hadn't done anything interesting in their lives. And then these stories come out that are just amazing. But we were purposely going for that.
Gotcha. Okay.
One of the women, if you've been here a long time, one of the women was Mary Moore. And her father, he was the one who saw the train station in Tempe and said, "This is God's country." The Moore family, there are more buildings in Tempe, and there's one on campus, and her father becomes the mayor and a governor. And I mean, they were a well-known family, and Mary was certainly well-known at ASU and in the community of Tempe, and she was around for years. But no, they were women, all of whom were not only happy with the designation of ordinary, but that's how they saw themselves. There was nothing special about their lives.
Okay. That was, it just.
I know.
Yeah, and just some of them looked like I've seen you somewhere, but no, I guess not. Okay.
Well, I mean, you might have, because they all lived in the area. Well, some of them were in Globe, Miami. All the rest were in Maricopa County. But it was a while ago, and they were old then.
I would have been here. Does anybody else have any questions for Dr. Rothschild? Well, there's nothing in the chat, but you can always unmute yourself if you have a question.
What was the name of your book again? Could you show that? I was trying to look it up to see.
It's called Doing What the Day Brought, an Oral History of Arizona Women.
And you're the author?
Yeah, me. I'm the author, and one of my former graduate students, who's also now a professor. I did it with Pam Ronick, who was one of the interviewers. I only interviewed one person. I interviewed Cecilia Sneezy, who was White Mountain Apache Indian, but it wasn't set up for me to interview anything. It was all graduate students were to do the interviewing, which they did. I trained them, and then they did the interviewing. I was directing the women's studies program. I had an administrative job as well as a teaching job at that point. It was a great project. I was in the Reader's Theater, and you, I'm sure, could recognize my voice in the slide tape show. So I was very involved with it, but I didn't do most of the interviewing, or really any of the interviewing except for one.
Well, I really enjoyed it because it made me think of people in Alberta going through the winter. Here it's going through the summer, and how they ever survived that.
I know. I don't think it was as horrible as it is these days, though. Because I've talked to people even, say, 40 years ago, said that, there wasn't as much built up, and it seemed to cool off at night, which it doesn't do now.
Right. We have more of a cement island here now. But part of I should say, your comment, Carol, made me think of part of the reason I did this project is I am a Westerner. I am a 4th generation Washingtonian, and I moved east to come to Arizona. And I knew that women were absolutely integral to making Washington State work. And my great-grandparents settled in Washington in the 1880s. And so when I moved to Arizona, I wanted to know, I was very active in sort of combating sexism in education. I was very active nationally with education equity for women and girls. And so I looked at and I knew that Arizona history was required. And I looked at the 2 Arizona history books that were used in high schools. There were only 2 that existed. And one of them had 1 sentence on women, 1. The entire freaking book had 1 sentence on women.
Oh,
And
wow.
the other one had 100% more because it had 2 sentences. And I was so angry that that's when I decided I was going to do an oral history project, write a book, do some presentations, because Arizona history was required when my children, it was required in this state, both in like 4th or 5th grade and in high school, freshmen in high school. And every single child in public schools in Arizona had to take Arizona history. And women got, at the most, 2 sentences in 1 paragraph. That was it. When my 14-year-old son, who's now will be 50 this summer and is himself an incredibly accomplished history teacher, was taking Arizona history at Marcos de Niza High School in Tempe. And I was in the middle of finishing the book. He came home from school and we were having our "what did you do in school today" conversation at dinner. And he said, "Well, you're gonna really love this, Mom. My teacher in Arizona history said women didn't do anything in this state."
Oh,
And I said, I thought about raising my hand and saying, "You're really stupid. My mother's finishing a book on it and there's lots of things." But then I decided not to do that. I went to school the next day and threatened a lawsuit for chilly climate, Title IX lawsuit. And anyway, I ended by teaching a bunch of Arizona history at Marcos de Niza about women. But that was the sort of motivation for doing this. I was so upset that there was so little acknowledgement of what women did. And I still think that's criminal, but that's been changed.
Yeah. Well, you helped to do that.
That's great.
It was very personal to me because, because I'm a Westerner and women built this country. I mean, all of the volunteer work. I mean, literally every single hospital, church, and museum in Arizona was started. That's old at all, was started by women. And women started them as volunteers, and then they got boards of directors. And then when they finally started making money, the men came in as chairs of the boards of directors. But literally every single church, museum, and hospital was started by a volunteer women group.
Mm-hmm.
Still inequality. So that's why we have to keep working on that.
We're still working on the ERA, right? And trying to get the extension. Anyway, thanks. It was fun for me to revisit this. I hadn't seen it in a long time.
This is great.
Thank
you.
Thank you so
I
much.
liked it a lot.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mary.
Thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Mary.
Bye, everybody.
Sylvia, I wanted to mention that whoever said that vaccines open to age, whatever it was, 18 or 16 and above today was correct. I got a notice from Greg Stanton while we were doing this. So that's a huge jump from 55 down to 16.
Yeah. You know, that's the problem about putting the newsletter together like a month ahead of time, because I said 45. Everybody's going to get 45. You know, that's completely wrong. But anyway, you know, it's our best
guess. If you about something else, you could just add that in there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I have to say thank you to Arizona, because I've had both my shots here, which will be nice for traveling home.
That's good.
That's good.
Were you worried about getting back home?
Pardon?
Were you worried about getting back home if you didn't have the vaccination?
No, not really. I'm in good health, but it just feels good to know that I do have it.
Yeah, and you don't have to wait till you go through your quarantine process on going over the
because
border.
that's 14 days. When
That's quite a quarantine.
Besides, you want to see your son who's here, and does he have a family? Like you have grandchildren?
No, he doesn't. He's not married.
Yeah, but at least you can see him without worry and all of that. So good.
Well, I hope to be going to Canada this summer if they open it back up. We were supposed to go fishing up in Saskatchewan last year, and obviously that didn't happen.
Oh, well, I spent
It
many
happened this
years
summer or
living in
not, but-
Saskatchewan, so,
No, I'm just saying, I don't know if it's gonna happen or not, but
and great fishing there, yes.
yeah, yeah, a place that